Good morning, this is Nicole Ringgold. Today I'm going to show you how to fabricate a hollow form. You will need 22 gauge sterling silver sheet. I will show you the basics of the hollow form technique, but if you choose, you can take it further. Create tomatoes, blueberries, poppies, or you can leave it as a bead. Let's get started. As I already stated, you'll need 22 gauge sterling silver sheet and a disc cutter. This one I got from Rio Grande, and it's by Swanstrom. I'm going to use the largest size in this disc cutter, but of course you can choose to go smaller. Place the cutter on a steel block. Here I'm using copper sheet, also 22 gauge, on the opposite side of where I'm cutting my discs. This ensures that the disc, when it's cut, is perfectly round. Secure your silver inside the disc cutter and then use a mallet, this one is a brass mallet, and hammer the appropriate sized cutter blade all the way through the disc cutter. If you don't have a disc cutter, you can simply saw out your circles. From here, you will need to anneal your sheet. I use an oxygen propane Little Smith torch. This is the appropriate flame that I would use to solder, and now I'm adding propane for an annealing flame. If this is confusing for you, I have a whole tutorial on how to use the Little Smith torch. In any case, heat your piece, anneal it until it's black, and then throw it in the pickle. This dapping block kit from Durston I also got from Rio Grande. You don't necessarily need to invest in Durston because it is more expensive. However, the Durston blocks, each cup is beveled, which prevents marring of the silver. So if you cannot purchase this specific set, I would recommend at least investing first in the block itself. You will understand why this is important in the next steps. Place your pre-annealed disc in the appropriate sized cup. Select the dapping pin that allows room for your silver sheet. And at this point, hammer straight down to the center of the cup. You will not want to skip cup sizes. So after you've done this, move to the next smaller cup and then find the appropriate pin size for that cup. Again, making sure that there's room for the silver. You don't want it to be too snug. Keep going with this process until the rim of your silver sits above the rim of the dapping cup. Once the rim of the silver is above the dapping cup, you might think it's too small to continue moving forward, but it actually can fit, but you're going to need to change your technique, and that's why this particular dapping block with the beveled edges is important. Now you'll see that the silver sits above the next cup. You will continue working in order, not skipping any cup sizes. Tilt the silver at an angle and make sure your dapping pin is straight up and down. You don't want it angled like this. You want it straight up and down. Your goal is to bring in the diameter of your hollow form. Hammer the upper rim of your silver. Rotate it slightly and then continue to hammer the upper rim of your silver. Once the rim is perfectly round, make sure that your silver sits upright in the cup. Take that dapping pin and hit straight down to ensure that your silver is snug on all sides inside the dapping cup. Move to the next size down. Once again, place your silver at an angle. Make sure that your pin is straight up and down. Hammer, focusing on that upper rim, making sure that you're working it until it's a perfect circle and you've brought the diameter of your silver inward. Once you've brought in the diameter, then be sure to hit straight down. You don't want to move to the next cup down until your silver fits perfectly inside the dapping cup. If I were to stop dapping at this point, my hollow form would be more of a sphere, which is fine. You may choose to stop there. My goal is to create a perfect ball, so I need to go one step further. To do so, I'm going to move to the next size down, not skipping a cup, and repeating the entire process. If you're going through this entire process with me, you might wonder, when is your silver work hardened? In other words, could it split? Could it crack? Annealing and pickling your silver ensured two things. When you anneal, you coax the fine silver to the surface. Your silver is then malleable or soft. Pickling it post-annealing allows you to see the white, fine silver at the surface. As you hammer, you're work hardening that silver again. Work hardening your silver turns it gray. You can watch your silver turn gray, and here are some spots where you can see the gray and still some of the white. If it's entirely gray, you'll want to re-anneal before continuing to hammer. Otherwise, your silver could crack. Once you've formed your two half spheres, sand down using various grits of sandpaper the rims so that they're perfectly flush. If there's even a tiny gap, keep sanding. You really truly want them to be perfectly flush. I'm not exaggerating. You really want them to be perfectly flush. Have I mentioned that you want them perfectly flush? Like truly zero gaps, like this. Use a high-speed twist drill, and doesn't matter what size, but pierce a hole in one of your half spheres. Piercing a hole is essential because when you're soldering it together without the hole, it could explode. In this next step, I'm using a titanium quad from Lion Punch Forge. This allows me to heat the sphere from all angles. Set aside hard solder. Place the half sphere with the hole rim side up. And then be sure to flux everything that your torch touches, the outside and the inside of the half sphere. Again, I'm using a Little Smith oxygen propane torch. So here I'm turning it on, and then I'm watching for that light blue, slightly rounded tip in my torch. Heat the half sphere until the flux foams, and then pick up your solder with your pick. Heat your solder, not your pick. If your pick gets too hot, you're going to need to quench it. And then you can transfer your solder from your pick to the edge of the sphere. You'll want to not point down, but across the sphere. You don't want to heat the mass too much. But you need to heat the silver enough for it to transfer from your pick to the rim. To start, I like to just transfer the solder to the rim, leave it there, just balled up. And then once I have all of the solder pieces along the rim, I will sweat them to the silver. If this process takes too long, or if you're heating directly down into the cup, you'll likely burn off the flux before your solder has a chance to flow when you make the effort to puddle it. Once the solder is placed on the rim, change the angle of your torch, and you're going to point the heat. You're going to focus the heat directly below each of the solder balls so that you sweat them inward, inside this half sphere. Pickle and quench. An alternative to the titanium quad is this really cool, it's a hollow form helper, also made by Lion Punch Forge. This way, if you choose, you can work on more than one hollow form at a time, and you can still work on your piece using your torch, angling your torch, and accessing your metal from different directions. Sorry, sometimes when I speak, I feel like I'm totally twisting up my tongue. Moving forward, take your two half spheres, place them together, flux the entire outside. I use my T-Flux from Rio Grande. Make sure that the pinhole is facing upward when you put it back on the titanium platform or whatever nest you choose to use. Make sure all of the sides are flush. And in case you're wondering, I use a Silquar, S-I-L-Q-U-A-R soldering platform, also from Rio Grande. I like to place my pick on top of the hollow form so that when I'm heating it, until the flux foams, I'm making sure that it's not bouncing all over the place. Once the flux foams, I can remove my pick, and then I do kind of like a 2-3 count, where counting 3 on the bottom, 2 on the top, 3 on the bottom, 2 on the top. In this way, I'm heating the entire mass, but I'm coaxing the solder that's on that upper rim down. I'm rotating the piece and watching for that solder to flow all the way along through the seam. Since I focus so much of my torch on the bottom, you can see here, the bottom side is black. The top side is still relatively white or slightly yellow. That means there's still flux there, but the black means there's no more flux. As you inspect the seam, if you find a gap, and I might have one right here, I might have one. So in which case I'll show you what to do to make sure that your hollow form is entirely sealed. Put your piece back somewhere on your nest, on your titanium quad, to make sure that it doesn't roll around. Find your gap. I've got medium solder placed on my platform. I'm going to reflux, because remember that black means that I have no more flux in that spot. And then I'm going to heat my mass. Pick up my solder with my pick. Again, make sure that your pick doesn't get hot. You heat the solder, not your pick, and your pick needs to be clean. Otherwise, you might just smear your solder across the platform. Heat the entire mass. Watch for I like to watch for a slight yellow hue, which means solder flow point. And then I put my medium solder right where that gap is, and then take my torch and go back and forth across the seam so that it follows the heat into that gap. And there I've filled any potential openings. If you grind down or sand down the seam, you'll also see whether or not there are any openings. From here, there's so much you can do with your hollow form. You can drill through the current pinhole all the way through and create a bead. Or in a future video, I'm going to show you how to close the hollow form, and you can make blueberries, tomatoes, poppies. There's so much that you can make using this process, but this is the first step. I know I made that sound really easy. This is the first series of steps, but once you've mastered this, there's much more you can do. As always, please feel free to ask questions or comment below, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you. Have a great day.